You can tell a lot about a man by the hands he refuses to shake. The words drifted softly across the polished convention hall just seconds before the silence hit. 40 floors above downtown San Francisco, under walls of blue LED light and giant floating screens displaying the future of artificial intelligence, executives moved through the Titan Tech Global Summit like sharks through cold water. Tailored suits brushed past champagne trays. Investors checked stock prices on glowing phones. Startup founders rehearsed billion-dollar pitches in hushed corners beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Market Street. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Pierce, the white tech CEO everyone wanted a piece of. Tall, sharp jaw, silver tie perfectly aligned against a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. Cameras followed him everywhere. His company, Neuronetics, had once been Silicon Valley's brightest AI darling before rumors of collapsing funding and emergency layoffs started spreading through the industry like smoke. Still, Nathaniel carried himself like a man too important to fail. "Mr. Pierce, one quick photo." "Nathaniel, over here." Flashbulbs burst around him while assistants cleared a path through the crowd. That was when Elijah Brooks stepped forward. No entourage. No designer logo stitched across his jacket. Just a calm black man in a dark wool coat standing near the entrance of the investor lounge, holding a simple leather portfolio under one arm. He looked almost invisible beside the spectacle around him, which was exactly why nobody noticed the watch hidden beneath his sleeve or the private security team quietly observing from across the hall. Elijah offered a polite smile and extended his hand. "Nathaniel Pierce. Good to finally meet you in person." For half a second, Nathaniel looked directly at him. Then his eyes dropped to Elijah's hand. The room seemed to inhale all at once. Nathaniel didn't shake it. Instead, he turned slightly and greeted a venture capitalist standing behind Elijah with a grin polished for cameras. "Richard, there you are." A few people nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks. Someone coughed into a champagne glass. Elijah's hand remained suspended in the air for one long, brutal moment before he slowly lowered it back to his side. Nathaniel barely acknowledged him now. "We're discussing billion-dollar infrastructure tonight," he said casually, loud enough for the nearby executives to hear. "Not outreach programs." A quiet chuckle slipped from somewhere near the bar. Another followed. Elijah said nothing. His face didn't tighten. Didn't crack. But the reflection from the conference lights caught something sharp in his eyes before he stepped aside to let Nathaniel pass. The music resumed. Conversations restarted. Yet the tension lingered like static electricity under the glow of the giant digital screens overhead. Nathaniel continued toward the VIP elevator surrounded by board members and investors while Elijah remained near the glass wall overlooking the city below. Rain had started outside, thin streaks sliding down the windows like silver wires against the dark California skyline. Beside him, a young hotel employee whispered carefully, "You okay, sir?" Elijah looked down toward the crowded streets nearly 500 feet below before answering with a faint smile. People usually reveal themselves before they reveal their intentions. Then he adjusted the cuff of his coat, covering the edge of the platinum watch beneath it, and walked quietly toward the service corridor while, behind him, the man who had refused his hand stepped closer and closer to the biggest mistake of his life. The service corridor behind the investor lounge felt like a different universe from the glittering summit outside. The carpet disappeared. The jazz music faded into the low mechanical hum of ventilation units and distant elevator cables. Fluorescent ceiling lights washed the narrow hallway in pale white, reflecting softly against stainless steel carts stacked with folded table linens and empty champagne crates. Elijah Brooks walked calmly through the corridor with one hand in his coat pocket, his pace steady, unhurried, as if the humiliation from 10 minutes earlier had already dissolved somewhere behind him. A young janitor pushing a cleaning cart paused near the corner. "Sir. You are not supposed to come through this hall unless you have staff clearance." Elijah stopped and smiled gently. "Old habit," he said. I have spent enough time in service hallways to feel more comfortable here than in ballrooms. The janitor laughed nervously, not realizing the man standing in front of him controlled more cloud infrastructure contracts than half the companies presenting upstairs. Elijah continued toward a quiet side exit overlooking Mission Street. Rain tapped softly against the metal door as he loosened his tie slightly beneath the collar of his dark sweater. The summit badge hanging from his neck still identified him only as E. Brooks. No company title. No executive branding. No photograph. That anonymity had always served him well. Most people in rooms like this saw what they expected to see. A black man without a flashy suit became invisible before he even spoke. Across the city, Nathaniel Pierce stepped into the private executive lounge reserved for keynote speakers and top investors. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and espresso. A digital fireplace glowed against the far marble wall while assistants hurried between tables carrying tablets and updated stock reports. Nathaniel loosened his cufflinks as one of his board members, Gregory Shaw, approached with visible tension in his face. "You disappeared fast downstairs," Gregory muttered. Nathaniel grabbed a glass bottle of sparkling water from the counter. "Just avoiding another founder begging for funding." Gregory did not smile. "You should be more careful tonight." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "About what?" Gregory lowered his voice. "Aurora Infrastructure has someone here." Nathaniel stopped twisting the cap. "You are sure? That fund is our last real shot. Every other investor is waiting for the earnings report before touching us." Nathaniel looked toward the rain-streaked windows overlooking the glowing skyline. 11 days. That was all the runway Neuronetics had left before the headlines turned fatal. 11 days before payroll problems, before layoffs leaked publicly, before the board replaced him with someone younger and safer. He had built the company from a rented apartment in Palo Alto with 2 engineers and a folding table. Now the same empire was hanging by a thread held together by investor confidence and carefully rehearsed optimism. Gregory slid a thin black folder across the counter. Aurora scheduled a private evaluation tonight after the final panel. Nathaniel opened it immediately, scanning the pages under the soft amber lights. Financial projections. Infrastructure expansion models. Emergency capital restructuring. Then one line stopped him cold. Lead Representative, E. Brooks. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Who is Brooks?" Gregory shrugged. "Nobody seems to know. Aurora keeps leadership hidden. They move through shell offices, private attorneys, offshore structures. But whoever runs it controls billions in cloud assets." Nathaniel stared at the initials for another moment while, somewhere deep in his memory, a calm voice echoed again. "We are discussing billion-dollar infrastructure tonight. Not outreach programs." Outside the lounge windows, thunder rolled faintly over San Francisco Bay while far below on the wet city streets, Elijah Brooks stepped into the rain without an umbrella, disappearing quietly into the crowd as the man who had dismissed him unknowingly prepared to ask for his help. By 8:30 that evening, the rain over San Francisco had thickened into a cold silver curtain wrapping around the glass towers downtown. Inside the Titan Tech Summit, the energy had shifted. The loud networking smiles from earlier now felt tighter, more calculated. Investors gathered in smaller circles whispering over market rumors while giant presentation screens rotated through artificial intelligence forecasts nobody entirely trusted anymore. Nathaniel Pierce stood backstage behind the main auditorium, adjusting the microphone clipped beneath his tie as production assistants counted down the seconds before his keynote panel began. A makeup artist reached toward his forehead with a powder brush, but Nathaniel stepped away impatiently. "I am fine." He was not fine. His phone vibrated again in his jacket pocket. Another message from finance. Another warning about liquidity pressure. He ignored it and looked through the narrow gap between the curtains toward the audience beyond. More than 2,000 people filled the auditorium beneath sweeping blue lights and suspended digital banners displaying the Neuronetics logo. Journalists sat near the front rows. Venture capital firms occupied the center. Somewhere in that crowd, according to Gregory, sat a representative from Aurora Infrastructure. Nathaniel inhaled slowly. This panel could save everything if he controlled the narrative. A voice over the speakers announced his name, followed by applause sharp enough to echo against the steel rafters overhead. Nathaniel stepped onto the stage wearing the same polished confidence that had made him one of the most recognizable tech founders in America. The moderator welcomed him beside two artificial intelligence researchers and a cybersecurity executive while cameras floated silently across the room on robotic tracks. Tonight, the moderator began, we are discussing the future of ethical artificial intelligence in American infrastructure. Nathaniel smiled automatically. Ethical. The word had become Silicon Valley's favorite decoration. Artificial intelligence is not replacing humanity, Nathaniel said smoothly into the microphone. It is amplifying human potential. The audience nodded. A few people typed notes. Investors watched carefully from dimly lit tables near the rear of the room. Nathaniel continued speaking about innovation, predictive systems, and global expansion while giant graphics glowed behind him in electric blue. Then movement near the back row caught his attention. Elijah Brooks had entered quietly through a side aisle and taken a seat near the rear wall beneath one of the exit signs. No spotlight touched him. No one announced him. Yet somehow Nathaniel felt his presence immediately. Elijah sat with one ankle crossed calmly over the other, listening without expression. Nathaniel forced himself to continue. The future belongs to companies willing to move faster than fear, he declared confidently. That line earned applause. Then the moderator opened the floor for audience questions. A young founder asked about machine learning regulation. A journalist questioned data privacy concerns. Then a deep calm voice rose from the back of the auditorium. How can a company claim to value ethical intelligence, Elijah asked, if the people leading it decide someone's worth before hearing them speak? The room went still. Nathaniel recognized the voice instantly. Several heads turned toward the back row. The moderator blinked awkwardly beneath the stage lights. Nathaniel forced a small laugh. This industry moves quickly, he replied. Leadership requires making fast judgments. Elijah did not look away. Fast judgments built this country's greatest failures too. A low murmur spread across the auditorium. Nathaniel's smile tightened almost invisibly. With respect, he said carefully, technology is driven by performance, not emotion. Elijah leaned back slightly in his chair. Interesting, he said softly. Because emotion was the first thing in your face when you refused my hand. Silence crashed across the room harder than any applause before it. Even the moderator stopped moving. Somewhere near the front row, a glass touched a table too loudly. Nathaniel felt heat rise slowly into his collar while hundreds of eyes shifted between the stage and the quiet black man standing beneath the exit sign, the same man nobody important had bothered noticing until that exact moment. The silence inside the auditorium stretched so long it almost became physical. Nathaniel Pierce remained frozen beneath the white stage lights while thousands of eyes moved between him and Elijah Brooks standing quietly near the rear exit beneath the glowing red sign. The giant digital screens behind the stage continued looping artificial intelligence graphics that now felt strangely hollow against the tension spreading through the room. Somewhere near the media tables, a reporter slowly lowered her phone. Nobody seemed willing to breathe too loudly. Nathaniel forced a controlled smile back onto his face, though the muscles near his jaw had tightened visibly. I think we are drifting away from the purpose of this panel, he said carefully into the microphone. Elijah nodded once. Maybe that is the problem. A few nervous chuckles scattered through the audience before fading quickly. The moderator attempted to redirect the conversation. Perhaps we should move to another question. But the atmosphere had already shifted. Investors leaned forward now with the sharp stillness of people sensing something valuable unfolding in real time. Nathaniel stepped away from his chair and moved closer to the front edge of the stage. "You seem personally offended," he said, his tone measured but colder now. "Business decisions are not emotional attacks." Elijah slipped one hand into his coat pocket. "Refusing to shake someone's hand before hearing their name is not business. It is assumption." The room tightened again. Cameras pivoted silently toward Nathaniel. One of the panel guests adjusted uncomfortably in his seat while the moderator stared down at his cue cards as if searching for an escape route. Nathaniel exhaled slowly through his nose. "This industry rewards efficiency," he replied. "People make fast impressions." Elijah's expression never changed. "And some people spend their whole lives paying for other people's impressions." The words landed softly but carried through the auditorium with impossible weight. Nathaniel glanced briefly toward Gregory Shaw seated near the investor section. Gregory did not look away this time. That unsettled him more than the audience did. Nathaniel straightened his posture. "If you have concerns about our company philosophy, I would be happy to discuss them privately after the summit." Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Would you have offered that conversation before learning I was connected to Aurora?" The auditorium erupted into low murmurs. Nathaniel felt his stomach drop. He had not said the fund's name publicly. Yet somehow the room instantly understood what that question implied. Investors exchanged looks. Phones lit up across the darkened rows. The moderator blinked rapidly. "Wait," someone whispered near the center tables. "That is him." Nathaniel stared toward Elijah more carefully now. The plain wool coat. The simple summit badge. The calm posture. Suddenly every detail looked different. Elijah stepped slowly into one of the aisle lights, enough for the audience to finally see him clearly. "You asked earlier who belongs in conversations about billion-dollar infrastructure," he said evenly. "Funny thing is, most of the servers powering your company run through contracts my team approved." Nathaniel's face lost color almost instantly. Gregory stood halfway from his seat. One of the journalists near the front row began typing furiously on a tablet. The moderator looked completely lost now. Nathaniel tried to recover. "If there has been some misunderstanding tonight," Elijah interrupted him quietly. "There was no misunderstanding." His voice remained calm. "You saw exactly what you wanted to see." Those words cut deeper than anything louder could have. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the microphone. Suddenly the heat from the stage lights felt unbearable against his collar. Then his phone vibrated inside his jacket again. This time the screen lit up brightly enough for him to read the preview notification without removing it. Emergency board notice. Credit extension denied. For one terrifying second, Nathaniel forgot where he was standing. The audience blurred around the edges. Elijah noticed the flicker in his face immediately. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply gave Nathaniel one long steady look filled with something far worse than anger. Disappointment. Then Elijah turned calmly toward the exit doors while the man who had dismissed him stood speechless beneath the massive glowing logo of the company now beginning to collapse around him. The moment Elijah Brooks disappeared through the auditorium doors, the energy inside the summit collapsed into chaos. Conversations erupted all at once beneath the glowing stage lights while journalists rushed toward the exits with phones pressed to their ears. Investors leaned across tables whispering behind raised hands. The giant Neuronetics logo still hovered above the stage in electric blue, but now it looked less like innovation and more like a warning sign flickering over a sinking ship. Nathaniel Pierce remained standing near the front edge of the stage, microphone still hanging loosely in his hand. For the first time in years, he had no control over the room. The moderator quietly removed his earpiece and stepped backward without saying a word. One of the panel guests grabbed his water bottle and left immediately. Nathaniel could feel cameras following every movement now, searching for cracks in the armor he had spent a decade building. His phone vibrated again. Then again. Then again. He finally pulled it from his pocket. 12 missed calls. 43 unread messages. Emergency alerts from legal, finance, investor relations. Gregory Shaw appeared beside the stage stairs, his face pale beneath the auditorium lights. "We need to leave now," he said quietly. Nathaniel did not move. "Tell me this is recoverable." Gregory hesitated too long. That silence answered everything. As they pushed through the backstage corridor, production staff suddenly avoided eye contact. People who had been praising Nathaniel an hour earlier now stepped aside without speaking. The atmosphere had changed with brutal speed. Success in Silicon Valley was magnetic. Weakness was contagious. Inside the executive lounge upstairs, 3 board members were already waiting around the marble conference table. The room smelled sharply of coffee and stress. A stock chart glowed red across the giant wall monitor. Nathaniel entered first, loosening his tie as rain hammered softly against the windows overlooking downtown San Francisco. "How bad?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Finally, a gray-haired board member slid a tablet across the table toward him. Neuronetics stock had dropped another 14% in after-hours trading. A major lender had frozen emergency credit negotiations. 2 institutional investors were considering withdrawal by morning. But one line hit hardest of all. Aurora Infrastructure Fund has suspended all discussions indefinitely. Nathaniel stared at the sentence while the room around him faded into muffled noise. "No," he muttered quietly. "No, they would not react this fast." Gregory folded his arms tightly. "They already reacted before tonight. The summit only confirmed it." Nathaniel looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" Gregory's expression hardened. "It means Elijah Brooks was evaluating us long before you embarrassed yourself downstairs." The words landed like cold steel. Nathaniel turned away toward the rain-streaked windows. Far below, headlights crawled through the wet streets like streams of white light. 11 days. That number kept echoing through his head. 11 days until payroll collapsed. 11 days until headlines destroyed everything he had built. One of the younger board members finally spoke. "Who exactly is Elijah Brooks?" Gregory answered before Nathaniel could. "Founder of Aurora Infrastructure." The room fell silent again. "Impossible," someone whispered. Gregory shook his head slowly. "Not impossible. Intentional." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Suddenly every detail from earlier replayed with unbearable clarity. The plain coat. The calm voice. The offered handshake left hanging in the air beneath those bright conference lights. Nathaniel pressed one hand against the edge of the table as if steadying himself physically. "Get me a meeting with him tonight." Gregory looked exhausted now. "We already tried." Nathaniel turned sharply. "And?" Gregory swallowed once before answering. "Aurora just sent over their official statement." He slid a printed page across the table. Nathaniel picked it up slowly. The message was only one sentence long. "Respect is part of due diligence. Effective immediately, Aurora Infrastructure withdraws all investment consideration." Nathaniel read the line twice while the storm outside darkened the glass around him. Nobody in the room spoke. Somewhere far below on the streets of San Francisco, Elijah Brooks sat quietly in the back of a black town car watching rain slide across the window while the man who refused to shake his hand finally understood the price of underestimating someone he never bothered to truly see. Near midnight, the storm over San Francisco finally began to slow. Rainwater slid down the massive glass windows of the Meridian Hotel in long silver trails while the city below glowed beneath reflections of brake lights and neon signs. Inside the executive floor lounge, the noise from the summit had disappeared completely. Most investors had already left for private dinners or airport transfers. The hallways that had buzzed with ambition hours earlier now felt hollow and cold. Nathaniel Pierce stood alone beside the window of his suite with both hands resting against the marble ledge beneath the glass. His suit jacket hung over a nearby chair. His tie lay loosened across the table beside untouched coffee that had long gone cold. The television mounted silently on the wall displayed financial analysts discussing neuronetics with expressions carefully balanced between concern and fascination. Nathaniel muted it again. He could not stand hearing his own company described like an obituary. Across the room, his phone lit up repeatedly. Board members. Journalists. Investors. He ignored every call. For the first time in years, silence felt safer than conversation. Outside, fog drifted slowly between the skyscrapers while distant thunder rolled across the bay. Nathaniel stared down at the streets almost 40 stories below and replayed the moment from earlier again in his head. Elijah's hand extended politely beneath the conference lights. His own decision to look past it. The faint laughter nearby afterward. At the time, it had felt automatic. Fast. Forgettable. But now that same moment sat in his chest like something heavy and permanent. A quiet knock interrupted the room. Gregory Shaw stepped inside holding another folder beneath his arm. He looked exhausted. "You should get some sleep," Gregory said softly. Nathaniel gave a dry laugh without turning around. "I do not think sleep is really an option anymore." Gregory remained near the doorway for a moment before walking toward the table. "Public reaction is getting worse." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. "How bad?" Gregory set the folder down carefully. "Clips from the panel are everywhere now. Investors are asking questions about leadership judgment." Nathaniel nodded slowly. He already knew what that really meant. Silicon Valley forgave mistakes involving technology. It did not forgive weakness involving perception. Gregory hesitated before speaking again. "There is something else." Nathaniel turned slightly this time. "What?" Gregory slid a thin printed document across the table. Background report on Elijah Brooks. Nathaniel stared at the folder but did not touch it immediately. Finally he opened it. The first photograph showed a younger Elijah standing beside rows of server equipment in a cramped warehouse nearly 15 years earlier. Another showed him speaking at a university engineering conference. Another featured him beside governors and infrastructure officials. Quiet accomplishments. Quiet power. No flashy interviews. No magazine covers. Nathaniel flipped another page and stopped. Father, Marcus Brooks. Former maintenance engineer. Terminated from Pierce Systems, 2009. Nathaniel frowned slightly. Pierce Systems had been his father's company before the acquisition years ago. Why does that name sound familiar? Gregory folded his arms. Because your father fired him publicly during a product review meeting. Nathaniel looked up sharply. Gregory continued carefully. Marcus Brooks proposed a redesign that later saved another company millions in energy costs. But according to former employees, your father dismissed him in front of the entire department. Nathaniel looked back down at the photograph again. Elijah standing beside old server racks in a faded hoodie, long before the billions, long before Aurora. Suddenly something uncomfortable moved through him. Not guilt exactly. Recognition. The same look he remembered seeing on his own father's face years ago whenever someone entered a room already judged before speaking. Nathaniel sat down slowly at the edge of the couch. He did not withdraw because of the summit, he said quietly. Gregory remained silent. Nathaniel stared toward the rain-covered windows again. He withdrew because he already knew who I was before tonight. The room fell still except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant hum of traffic below. Then Nathaniel looked down once more at the old photograph of Marcus Brooks and finally understood something that frightened him more than losing money. Elijah Brooks had not just seen arrogance in him that night. He had seen history repeating itself. By 2:15 in the morning, the Meridian Hotel had gone almost completely quiet. The elevators no longer chimed every few seconds. The investor lounges sat empty beneath dimmed amber lighting. Outside, rainwater still clung to the glass towers of downtown San Francisco while fog rolled slowly through the streets below like smoke drifting between steel canyons. Nathaniel Pierce stood alone near the rooftop terrace entrance staring at his reflection in the dark window. His eyes looked older now. Tired in a way expensive suits could not hide. The summit badge still hung around his neck, slightly twisted, forgotten. Behind him, the executive floor hallway remained silent except for the distant hum of ventilation systems and the soft ticking of a decorative clock near the elevators. Then his phone vibrated once. Not a board member this time. Not legal. A single text message from an unknown number. Roof. 10 minutes. Nathaniel stared at the screen for a long moment before grabbing his coat from the chair beside the window. The rooftop terrace overlooked the entire city. Wet stone tiles reflected the pale glow of rooftop lighting while the cold night wind carried the smell of rain and ocean salt from the bay. Nathaniel stepped through the glass doors slowly. Elijah Brooks stood near the edge of the terrace beside the steel railing, hands resting calmly in the pockets of his dark coat. The city lights stretched endlessly behind him. He did not turn around when Nathaniel approached. For several seconds neither man spoke. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument earlier that night. Finally Nathaniel stopped a few feet away. "I almost did not come," he admitted quietly. Elijah nodded faintly. "But you did." Wind moved softly through the terrace. Somewhere far below, a siren echoed through the sleeping city. Nathaniel looked down at the wet concrete beneath his shoes before speaking again. "I read about my father tonight." Elijah's expression remained unreadable against the glow of the skyline. "Did you?" Nathaniel swallowed once. "I was 23 when Marcus Brooks was fired. I remember the meeting." Elijah finally turned slightly toward him. "Then you remember what your father said?" Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. He did remember. Not every word. But enough. Enough to feel ashamed now hearing them echo inside his own head. "He said your father did not belong in rooms where serious decisions were made." Elijah looked back toward the city again. "My father spent 18 years maintaining systems your company depended on. He understood those machines better than most executives understood their own business." Nathaniel listened silently. Elijah's voice never rose. That somehow made every sentence hit harder. "The redesign he proposed would have saved millions in cooling costs," Elijah continued. "But nobody cared because he wore a maintenance badge instead of a tailored suit." Rainwater dripped softly from the edge of the rooftop canopy above them. Nathaniel rested both hands against the cold railing now. "I became exactly like him," he said quietly. Elijah looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Worse." Nathaniel flinched slightly at the honesty. Elijah stepped closer to the railing beside him. "Your father judged people because he thought power made him superior. You judged people because somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing them at all." The wind moved between them again. Nathaniel stared out over the city lights blurring through lingering mist. "You could destroy my company completely after tonight," he admitted. "Maybe it deserves it." Elijah studied him carefully now. "This is the first honest thing you have said since we met." Nathaniel gave a tired laugh that barely sounded human anymore. "I spent years believing success meant being untouchable." Elijah nodded slowly. "And now?" Nathaniel looked down at his own hands resting against the railing. The same hands that had ignored another man's handshake beneath those bright conference lights hours earlier. "Now I think success might just mean becoming someone people do not have to recover from after meeting." For the first time that night, something softened slightly in Elijah's face. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something closer to understanding. The rooftop remained silent long after Nathaniel Pierce finished speaking. Wind moved softly across the wet terrace, carrying the scent of rain and cold steel from the bay below. The skyline shimmered through drifting fog while red aircraft lights blinked slowly atop distant towers like warning signals hanging over the sleeping city. Elijah Brooks stood beside the railing with both hands resting calmly in his coat pockets, watching traffic move through the streets nearly 40 floors beneath them. Nathaniel stayed a few feet away, no longer trying to defend himself, no longer speaking like a man delivering polished presentations to investors. The version of him standing there now looked smaller somehow. Human. Tired. I used to think people respected me because I built something important, Nathaniel said quietly after a long silence. Now I am starting to realize they just feared losing access to what I controlled. Elijah glanced toward him briefly. Power can make applause sound like honesty. Nathaniel nodded faintly. The words settled heavily in the cold air between them. Somewhere behind the rooftop doors, an elevator chimed softly before fading again into silence. Nathaniel looked down at the city lights reflecting against the wet stone floor. When my father ran Pierce Systems, he said carefully, he believed pressure made people stronger. He used humiliation like motivation. Elijah's expression remained unreadable. Nathaniel continued anyway. I hated it growing up. I promised myself I would build something different. A bitter smile crossed his face. Then somewhere along the way I became efficient instead of decent. Rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of the rooftop canopy above them. Elijah finally turned fully toward him now. Do you know what my father said after he got fired? Nathaniel looked up slowly. Elijah's voice stayed calm, almost reflective. He said the dangerous thing about certain rooms is not that they reject you. It is that they teach you to reject yourself before you even walk in. Nathaniel lowered his eyes immediately. The sentence struck deeper than any accusation earlier that night. Elijah stepped closer to the railing again. My father never stopped believing people deserved dignity. Even after that meeting. Even after being laughed at. Wind lifted the edge of Elijah's coat slightly as he spoke. That is what confused me most as a kid. I could not understand how someone could stay kind after being treated like they were invisible. Nathaniel swallowed hard. And now? Elijah looked out across the skyline. Now I understand kindness is expensive. Especially for people the world keeps testing. The city below glowed softly through the mist while silence settled between them again. Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. I am sorry. Elijah did not respond immediately. Nathaniel took a slow breath. Not because Aurora pulled out. Not because the board is panicking. I am sorry because for 1 second downstairs I looked at you and decided who you were before you even opened your mouth. Elijah studied him carefully. There was no anger left in Nathaniel's voice now. Only exhaustion and truth. Most people apologize after consequences arrive, Elijah said softly. Very few apologize after understanding arrives. Nathaniel looked toward him again. I do understand now. Elijah reached into his coat pocket slowly and removed a slim silver business card. He held it for a moment before offering it forward. Nathaniel stared at the card but did not take it immediately. The simple black lettering read only 3 words beneath Elijah's name. Character before capital. Nathaniel finally accepted it carefully between his fingers. What does this mean? He asked quietly. Elijah looked toward the glowing skyline one last time before answering. It means Aurora is still withdrawing from the original deal. Nathaniel's shoulders tightened slightly, but he stayed silent. Then Elijah continued. But tomorrow morning, if you are willing to rebuild your company differently than the man who inherited it, I am willing to have one more conversation. Nathaniel looked up sharply. Elijah offered his hand once again beneath the cold rooftop lights, calm and steady in the drifting rain. This time Nathaniel did not hesitate. He took it immediately with both hands, holding the handshake longer than necessary as if trying to repair something far bigger than business.